how much
Sorry.
college is about to change because of the incoming administration. So, for example, accreditation is going to be a very strange new world if the administration follows up on what they claim they're going to do.
Mm.
And we'll see when we get there. But I think for a lot of colleges, this is a time of turmoil.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I've heard reports at least from colleges, especially
Rumors,
with the
rumors and of war and
yeah,
rumors of war.
yeah, yeah, because there was something with the Pell Grants and stuff like that, right? And financial aid stuff.
Yeah, well, so the main function of accreditation is partly, I mean, if you're a micro college like we are, to prove that you really are who you say you are. But to give you an example, we had one of our people that will graduate from the college this semester at the end of the spring semester. And the person was just accepted into Johns Hopkins into their graduate program in international security.
Mm.
And I don't know how you measure such things, but when you look it up, they're one of the top two or three programs in the world. So the first thing that's true is you don't want your college to impede your ability to choose that, like the education that you're getting.
Yeah.
And accreditation at least establishes a floor for schools, but it really doesn't establish much more than that. And I think the federal government, the main purpose, of course, was distributing federal money
Mm.
uh, and guaranteed student loans and things like that. And if the federal government decides not to work with local accreditors, regional and national accreditors, and do that themselves, then a lot of the function of accreditation has vanished.
Mm.
For example, no one goes to Rice University here in town and asks if they're accredited. Like they're sending people to Mars and the moon, and they have Nobel Prize winners on their faculty. It does, like the accreditation bureau needs them. They don't need Rice. And so really the question for parents to be asking colleges as we go through this time of transition will be, if my student wants to go to grad school, can you get them in?
Yeah.
If they don't want to go to grad school, can they get a job?
Right.
Because one of those two outcomes, are likely to happen to a student when they're done with college.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's always been an interesting conversation to me because my own bachelor's degree is not officially accredited, or
right,
it's accredited but by like a non-recognized accrediting agency. And uh and I just got it from a little Bible college, somewhere in
right.
Texas.
And what you discover is how relatively meaningless that is. Now, again, this is a buyer beware. If you're going to a small, less well-known college than Rice, you really have to do your due diligence. And I can talk to parents if they want to know about that, about ways to know if you're going to a diploma mill. Like, is your college fake? There are ways of discerning that. And by the way, there are accredited schools nobody should go to because they couldn't pass these tests.
Right.
Like that, I can get a first-rate student into a first-rate grad program doesn't make me awesome. It means I'm not awesome, right? For sure. So what you want to do is go to a place that doesn't impede God's gifts in you. And of course, you want them to grow and you want to be discipled and mentored, but all that's very hard to prove until you go to a place. So one test parents should be asking of even accredited schools is, um, if my kid has first-rate talent, can you show me examples of how your school can get me to first-rate places? Employers, so we've already had two graduates pass you know, uh, through law school and pass the bar and become practicing. Well, I guess one and one's about to do that. And so that's the real world.
Yeah. 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 That's like, I mean, I didn't go to a top rate grad school or a top rate doctoral program, but I did both of those things with an unaccredited bachelor's degree. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where again, top rated, what uh people need to remember that mentoring is everything, and the people you study with, that's everything in your life. And to have a lifelong mentor that you met in grad school, that is much, much better than going to a high ranked program where no one talked to you
yeah.
because they were busy doing writing and research. So,
Right.
but we can talk about all those things. I'm sorry, we probably
Yeah.
have begun and I'm just sitting here talking your head off.
No, that's all right. It's a good conversation. Yeah. So let me say welcome to everyone who's here and to those who are watching the recording later. Thank you for joining us. We have Dr. John Mark Reynolds from St. Constantine College in Houston, Texas. He will be talking to you all in just a few minutes about the St. Constantine College and about your questions or answering your questions about the college. And honestly, probably about just about anything you could ask him. He would be willing to share his wisdom and knowledge about those things and experience. So as you heard already in the first few minutes, just the conversation we were having about accreditation and stuff. So, and I think especially your point there at the end, Dr. Reynolds, about the um, the greater value, which is that mentor, that ongoing, lasting relationship with a mentor. So, very, very good stuff. Um, this week, I am talking. Each day, I'm talking about a different topic, but all connected to what to look for in a college, or how to make the most out of college. Maybe is perhaps a better way of saying it. And on day one, I talked about what the world says college is for and what they get right and what they get wrong. Yesterday, I talked about perhaps what the real benefits of college are and what to look for there. And today, I want to talk about how to be the right kind of student to get those real benefits.
Mm.
So, if the real benefits of college are wisdom and virtue, which is what I would argue they are. Um, though I would definitely add to that now the layer of the mentor who helps you get to wisdom and virtue, perhaps even beyond your college, your time in college. The what is the uh, approach that you need to take as a college student to help you get the most out of that, to help you get the most wisdom and virtue that you can. And I want to suggest that the thing that you can do in college that you should get plenty of opportunity to do is to learn to perceive, and particularly to perceive the truth. When I think about the world, the way the world works, I think of that God has created the world, and that God creates the world through his son, the Logos, capital L Logos, right out of John 1 1. And the Logos creates logoi, little l, a little l Logos, that are the things of the created world. Not just the physical and visible, but also the spiritual and the invisible. So he creates the Logos of an angel, the Logos of a spirit, the Logos of um, then the physical things too, like trees and clouds and the sun and the moon and the stars, the earth, the grass, the oak tree, whatever. And then us, we are also there on that level, right? We each of us is a little L Logos that God has made in his image. Um, but then we logoi then can create what I call a sub logoi, a sub logos, um, or what is Tolkien, right? Who refers to this? We're sub creators and we make sub creations. So you have the logos with a capital L, that is God. The little L Logos, which is all the things that God has made, including human beings, and then you have a sub logos, which is the thing that's man made. A man makes this logos, um, and and ultimately, to attain to wisdom and virtue, we need to become as much like the big L Logos, Christ, as we can. And we do that by um, but we need to perceive him. We need to see who he is, what he is, how he is, and become more and more like that. But we do that by learning to perceive, by practicing on learning to perceive the little L logoi that are in the world around us, or in the artifacts that humans have made. Great books, great music, great art, poetry, whatever it is. So I can practice on finding the sub logos of a text like Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, and then that is helping me to see the logos, helping me learn how I can perceive the logos of man and then helping me, and then that helps me to learn how to perceive the logos that is God, that is Christ. And so then wisdom and virtue in this brief description that I'm giving is about perceiving the logos of things, and then interacting with them properly. So I have a logos. This tree in my yard has a logos, and my logos and its logos demand or uh, place responsibilities on me to treat it a certain way, to respond to it in a certain way, to act with it in a certain way, and and I am being virtuous when I do that. I'm being wise when I see that, when I see those the logos in each of us, and I'm being virtuous when I act properly according to the logos in each of us. Um, when I violate the logos of the tree and I make it do something, be something that it ought not to be, or be used in a way that it ought not to be, then I'm violating its nature or its logos or my own, and I am acting without wisdom and without virtue. So interestingly, there's a law in the Old Testament where God is telling the Israelites as they go into the promised land that when you get there, you will have to fight enemies. You will have to fight against these cities that are there, and you will have to destroy these enemies. And when you do, you will happen up. You will go upon a city. You will declare war on a city. You will go up against this city, and you will set siege to it. So you'll surround the city so that they can't get in or out until they kind of give up and you win the city over. Or they come out and attack you and you fight them and then you win the city that way. And he says that when you do that, you're going to create siege works. You guys know what siege works are, right? Like the battering rams that bust down the gates or the ladders or whatever that go up over the walls, the catapults, things like that. And he says when you make the siege works, you can make the siege works from any tree around the city, except any trees that are around the city, except those trees that bear fruit, right? God is teaching them in that moment that you have a nature as a human being, that tree has a nature as a fruit bearing tree, and the nature of the fruit bearing tree is to provide sustenance, to provide life. And you cannot take something whose purpose is to provide life and turn it into a weapon of death and destruction. You're violating its nature when you do that. So that's an example, right, of the wisdom of seeing what the tree is and the virtue of acting with it properly, not violating its nature or its logos. So when you go to college, when you do any kind of educational activity, what you want to do to get the most out of it is you want to go in and and acknowledge that that's your role, that's your responsibility. You're going to go into this class, whatever it is, a biology class, a literature class, a history class, philosophy, it doesn't matter. You're going to go into that class and you're looking to try to learn to perceive and understand the logos of the artifact, the biology text, or the frog you're dissecting, or the literature text you're reading, the poem you're reading, and you're looking for the logos. So then in the discussions that you're having, especially if you go to a good school where there's a seminar style type discussion like you would encounter at St. Constantine College, um, you're going in there not to simply agree with everybody around you, nor to disagree. The point is not to just like I'm just going to go in here, and the whole point of this is the whole point of the seminar is to get into an argument or a fight or a debate, but to pursue understanding, understanding that comes from having perceived in community with the logos of the artifact. And this 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 looks a little bit different than being able to answer what you what they put on the college test like the SAT and stuff, comprehension questions. It's not can I recall facts about the artifact. It's not can I answer these comprehension questions, but it's about trying to perceive what the artifact is embodying and draw out that logos. And doing it in community is so important because your classmates will be able to see things that you don't see. You'll be able to see things that they don't see, and you learn from each other. You learn from seeing what they notice that you don't. They learn from seeing what you notice that they don't. You learn from the kinds of questions they ask. your professors or your tutors, your teachers are there to help you kind of set what I like to call the out of bounds markers, right? I can move all around inside these two boundaries, looking for the logos of the text. Um, and but at some point, I'm deviating so far from what the text is actually saying that I'm starting to violate the text. Um, and one of the things that sets those boundary markers for us is the tradition. Like, how is the tradition viewed this text? Say we're talking about Homer's Iliad. Um, then the Iliad has a long 2,500 plus year history of people reading it, and they've come to understand it within a set of boundaries along the way. The professor can is kind of there to help guide the conversation, keep you within those bounds, so that you have a greater chance of being able to perceive the logos. Once you learn to perceive the logos, kind of connecting it back to my opening point, once you learn how to perceive the logos in man-made artifacts, it becomes easier to see the logos in the natural and spiritual world around us, and then ultimately to perceive and know Christ insofar as He's knowable to us. And so that practice, that doing of that, is kind of the path to um, is the path to wisdom and virtue. Being able to perceive what things are, and then how to act virtuously or act in accordance with that nature. Um, so it's a difficult thing for the young person to go into college and try to figure out, like, what is my role here. A Christian goes into a school that's not Christian, or has a professor that's not Christian, and can often feel this pressure, like, is it my job to correct him? Is it my job to argue with him? Is it my job to fight with him? And of course the professor isn't always, but sometimes might be thinking, well, it's my job to convert this kid out of her superstitious belief in a god. um, and then there's this argumentative um, debate, almost kind of warlike approach to learning, where it's really more like, I need to take the knowledge that's in my head and put it in her head, or I need to take the knowledge in my head and put it in his head. Whereas if we can learn to approach it as a place in which we can practice perceiving the reality of the nature of the logos, the truth of the artifact or the thing, then then we can actually be doing it in a way that moves us toward wisdom and virtue. So um, I'm going to stop there for today. We'll talk some more tomorrow. Um, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. John Mark Reynolds, who's going to talk to all of you about St. Constantine College. So thank you.
Well, and hopefully, in talking about the St. Constantine College, you and I can talk about some of the things that are more broadly applicable, whether you go to St. Constantine or not. So St. Constantine College is an Orthodox classical college in Houston, Texas. That's the important thing to know. We also are very interested in running debt-free education. So we charge $12,000 a year for tuition. A number we came to, less about making money than saying, what could a middle class family conceivably save up for, contribute to, if a student also works? So we tried to set tuition as low as possible to become a debt-free approach to education, because so many people take on massive amounts of student loans at the end. The other thing I should note is, we don't really do scholarshiping inside the school, but we will work with families, generally speaking. But for Orthodox priests in particular, we have an 80% tuition discount upfront. So if you happen to be watching this and you're a priest kid, or involved with the clergy of the Orthodox Church, that's a ministry we try to provide for our low-paid clergy. Getting all of that out of the way, uh, what is St. Constantine all about, and why might you choose it? And I want to say, over the course of my career, it's been my blessing to be able to start several things over the course of my career. So my career began by starting as first employee sat with a yellow legal pad, and worked on the Torrey Honors College at Biola University, where for 17 years we taught general education, great text. And I really recommend Torrey Honors to people looking for great text education, but also wanting to major in nursing or something like that, very particular majors. Biola is a faithful place, in particular for evangelical Christians. And so if you're a person that looks at Biola and says, yep, that's my faith tradition, it's a good choice. And then, of course, came to Houston to be the chief academic officer for Houston Christian University, where during my time there, it was my job to start a film school and to start an apologetics program and to beef up the Honors College, which is also a good choice. If you're looking for a Texas-based school, people like Nancy Piercy, we were able to hire there, who still works at Houston Christian University. So really good choice. So why would we do St. Constantine? Well, partly because if you're an Orthodox Christian or even not an Orthodox Christian, and you look at the world of Christianity, even the Roman world of Christianity, too often classical schools don't read the very church fathers that helped form the creeds. For example, St. Gregory, the two Gregories, St. Basil. Where do we get classical Christian education? Arguably the first strong advocate for discussions between Athens and Jerusalem. Yes, Justin Martyr in the second century, but really St. Basil began to put it all together and talk about it. And yet, in most great books curriculums, these Eastern fathers, who are also recognized in the West as very important thinkers, whether you're Reformed, wherever you are, if you're saying the Nicene Creed as part of your church experience, too often great text programs leave those church fathers out. So one thing to do with a curriculum list is say, is the whole mind of the church there? So St. Constantine, you'll certainly read Aquinas, for example, though we're an Orthodox school, and think about his impact, because we live in the west of the world, in Houston, Texas, really the west of the world. And so we examine those texts, but do you get the whole mind of the church? So we're really Orthodox. We're pan-Orthodox. We deal with all the Orthodox jurisdictions. But that is, I think, valuable to everyone who's looking at church history, because of where we live, because of the scope of our reading. I think in many ways, we're more reflective of the formation of the creeds that we all share in common in a kind of mere Christian way. But we're also classical. And this is where I want to step back and say, I've already said, hey, here's a couple of programs I can really recommend to you. I've been involved in them, helped start one of them, helped start programs at some other places. Uh, it's this. St. Constantine has the pedagogy that almost no great text program or even classical college can actually afford to do. And that pedagogy is what deeply formed, in the English speaking world in particular, the great graduates of Oxford and Cambridge that everyone likes to emulate. And that is the one-on-one tutorial. Now, that's really hard for a college to do. I mean, the most efficient class you could have would be 200 students with a sage on the stage giving a lecture. That's obviously very cost beneficial. And dirty little secret, colleges don't make money, particularly liberal arts colleges, particularly Christian colleges. Nobody is charging you enough money to pay for education. And so often colleges will have these giant general education classes to help pay for classes in the major that really can't possibly make money because they're very specialized. Nursing programs are like this, they cost a lot of money. And so the old Oxbridge, how did C.S. Lewis become C.S. Lewis? How did Tolkien become Tolkien? How did a Dorothy Sayers become a Dorothy Sayers? Often we want to emulate their education, but we can't really afford to activate it. And if you come to St. Constantine, we will give you a mentor, a tutor, who will meet with you one-on-one on a weekly basis, not a few times a semester, but as often as you want. We'll rotate that mentor in case they're not your cup of tea and you can get different perspectives over time. But this one-on-one tutorial really marks us as classical as opposed to merely a great text program. And we are a great text program. I've worked inside of great text programs for over 30 years. I have graduates who teach in many of the major universities in the world from those programs. So we know how to help somebody get a good education. But we can go further up and further in some ways by being able to really tailor individually education to you if you're a student. If you come to us and you've done great books all your life, like graduates of St. Constantine High School have done, we'll actually give you a year off of the program. It becomes 3 years of the program, but we'll also tailor what we're doing to where you're at. If you're an excellent writer, we'll make you a better writer. If you are an excellent speaker, we'll make you a better speaker. On the other hand, if you're not very good at either of those things through no fault of your own, we'll take you where you are the way God takes us and make us better than we are. We come to him just as we are to become different. And this can be done because really for every St. Constantine student, there is at one level this individualized educational program that's really fairly unique in the United States. So, a question to ask about any small college you're going to, or even big college, is do I have a one on one full time mentor, not a faculty advisor, who may meet with me a couple times, particularly in my freshman year, or meet with me 4 times? Do I have someone I can meet with several times during the week and at least once a week to work on my educational progress? And so often, even in England, programs like Oxford and Cambridge are under financial pressure to minimize this kind of education. And I think it's really vital. And I'm so grateful to the board of the St. Constantine College that they let us do that. But then, of course, the second aspect to a St. Constantine education becomes the group discussion. And this appears at a lot of great text programs, the Socratic-based discussion. And that is done at a very high level at St. Constantine. In addition to this shaping of writing, shaping of rhetoric, one-on-one tutorial. So what makes us classical? Uh, in one way, no great text program is genuinely classical. The ancient classical tradition assumed, or the older classical tradition, that by the time you got to us at the college level, you were fluent in Latin and Greek, and you spent much more time picking up what amounts to a classics degree. But times change. And one thing that's true is in the United States, colleges picked up burdens that the Oxbridge model didn't have. Parents, reasonably, you should expect your kid to be able to get a job or go to a good grad school. The dirty little secret is there's degree inflation. And so the kind of student who's going to do very well in college, about half of them are going to get some kind of further degree, a JD, an MD, an MDiv, if it's seminary, an MBA, if they're going to keep going in business. And so can that college get you into the very top rated grad programs in the United States? Because the other thing I'll say is this: where you go as an undergraduate matters much less than your last degree. So I graduated with a PhD in philosophy from the University of Rochester, and I haven't been introduced using my undergraduate degree in decades. I even sometimes forget where I got my undergraduate degree, which they wish I wouldn't do, and it was a wonderful experience. What you want from your undergraduate degree is a maximum amount of mentoring. And because we're truly classical in the sense I described, I can guarantee that you'll have that at St. Constantine from faculty that, from me to the newest faculty member there, won't close any doors for you. You'll be able to leave here. We just found out today that one of our seniors in the college was accepted to Johns Hopkins in an international studies program that's one of the top 2 rated programs of its kind in the world. That doesn't mean they should go there, and they might not go there. It means we didn't impede them because they came to a small Christian college. And sadly, not every place can say that. So I would say to parents, when you talk to the college, especially smaller colleges or Christian colleges, say, are the full range of options open? Do your students who don't want to go to grad school right away, are they able to go out into the workforce? Do they read well? Do they write well? Are they numerate? Do they think well? Are they friendly? Have they learned to be collegial in group discussions so that they can land a job, they can stick that job interview and go on? Because what I was going to finish with is to say American colleges picked up post World War II this job preparation component. And whether I like that or not, whether I would like to get in a time machine and go back and revive, the old Oxbridge, only a classics degree, we all are in the trenches in World War I, speaking Greek to each other as officers. That's not the world we live in. And so the great text approach is a way to provide for a broadly educated person. And then the classical approach of the one-on-one tutorial helps take a student. If you want to read fluent Greek by the time you graduate from here, we have the faculty that can help you do it. If you want to be fluent in Latin, we have the faculty that can help you do it. If you want to be fluent in Arabic as an Orthodox school, we have the faculty that can help you do it. And so the other thing I want to say about St. Constantine that is unique is we're the only K through 16, think of the grades, K through 16 school in the country. That doesn't mean some colleges don't have K through 12s that are associated with them. Hillsdale famously does. But you'll note that the high school is off doing its thing, the K through 12, and the college is doing its thing. Particularly for small colleges, that can really limit the number of faculty you're going to be involved in. Small colleges are great. I work at one, I founded one. I want you to consider going to one. But notice the downside of it can be if you have really weird interests or you have a particular thing you want to talk about, a micro college may have 10 faculty that come in and out. St. Constantine College has access to over 100 faculty members because we integrate the K through 12 faculty into our discussion and mentoring menu. So somebody who works in the nursery, as a real example, may be a world-class fluent Arabic speaker that if you want one-on-one tutorials in Arabic, she can provide that. On the other hand, our gardening teacher knows several more obscure biblical languages, Aramaic, things like that. His day job is to be out there in the garden helping some of the small ones. But if you have that particular interest, we can hook you up with what for a Christian college would be a fairly sizable faculty of full-time faculty members. Dirty little secret, ask the college you're applying to in your freshman year, how many full-time, not adjunct, adjunct's another word for part-time, and part-time faculty can be awesome, but it also can be a way the college is saving money. How many full-time faculty can they guarantee that you'll have? And if the answer is under 50%, don't go there. Just don't go there. Because what they're doing is almost surely giving you a group of overworked, underpaid, they're probably teaching at 3 or 4 different colleges in the area to try to keep bread on the table. And they don't have time to mentor you. They haven't gotten a full-time contract from the place you're looking. And there are Christian colleges and even very prestigious colleges where you can go all the way through your sophomore year without ever having a full-time faculty member. Your first full-time faculty member, you may be exposed to them your junior year inside your major. Again, in one way, I don't blame people. No college is making money. They're not sitting on a giant stack of cash if they're a liberal arts college. Don't think the Ivies, don't think the big state universities. They do have giant stacks of cash and they still play this game. So don't let anybody play this game with you. And it's a reason to think about St. Constantine because you will never experience someone who's not a full-time teacher here unless they're a special expert, somebody who's really gifted on Dante that we have come in and give a particular lecture. All of our teachers are full-time and we have a lot of them and you have access to many of them. So I think these are all, you should come here if you want to be truly Christian. You should come here if you want to be mentored the way Lewis I corresponded with a student of Lewis's, Sheldon Van Auken. He wrote a book called A Severe Mercy. And so Lewis spent a lot of time through letters and other things mentoring Van. Van paid back, I wrote him questions. He sent me answers on his little typewriter as I talked to him. You want somebody who will spend the rest of your life reaching out to you and helping you. That's Al Geyer at the University of Rochester for me, who, when he had a massive heart attack and had 30% lung function, was still, back then it was Skype, pre-Zoom, coming to teach my students about Plato in 36 hours in a single weekend. He'd do seminars where the only breaks were so he could change his oxygen to talk. It is true that I could have learned more Greek by taking an AI tutor, It's also true that I loved Al. And I would do anything to spend 10 more minutes discussing Plato with him. We discussed the last paragraph of Plato's Republic our entire lives together. That's 25, 26, 27 years. AI can't do that. The rent-a-professor down the road can't do that. I didn't, in one way, have that experience until grad school, because grad school was where serious people got serious education that was one-on-one mentoring. Every Greek class I took with Al, I was the only student. And really good universities will let you do that at a grad level. We think at St. Constantine that the pattern of history is that that should be done for undergraduates. Why could Oxbridge graduates go? I'm not an imperialist. I'm sorry that it existed, but they could go lead the empire right after graduation and do any number of jobs. It was because they received intensive mentoring in a community, a small community. The Oxbridge colleges were tiny compared to today's university. And that kind of attention produces results, especially if it's done in a Christ-centered place where parents, in particular, we have your back on the moral issues of the day. We also, however, teach Socratically. It's college, not church. You know, I'm a professor, not a parent in that sense of your kid. You're their parent. I'm not. I'm not going to come between that relationship. And I'm not a priest. I'm not going to try to take the place of their local church, whatever your group. You know, we send our Orthodox kids to Orthodox parishes, of course, but our non-Orthodox kids are faithful members of Catholic communities here or Presbyterian communities here. And we don't take the place of that. We come behind the pastor and the parent, and we'll support your values, but will support your values in this true Socratic way that adults can handle in a different way than like a K-8 kid can, by challenging every question. You have to believe in Christ and his physical resurrection. You have to trust the Bible. You have to be a person that can sign off on the deeply traditional Orthodox behavioral standards of the global church. We're not for changing inside of Orthodoxy. Our center holds. Nobody could even make a change if they wanted to. We're so disorganized in one way as a global church. And so we've got your backs, but we'll also not treat you like you're in hopped up Sunday school. Uh, if you want to come here and challenge every idea we have, we'll let you do it. And we'll talk to you about it and we'll work with you and help you grow. Because after all, if you're going to read the Iliad, you should at least consider, why did people think the Iliad was true, both religiously and in every other way as an adult? I, of course, think paganism is evil. I think idols are demons. And I'll talk to you about that if you would like me to talk to you about that in a one-on-one tutorial. But in class, I might press you to not just say all of that. This is the horrible freshman paper that everyone wants to write, why Zeus is worse than Yahweh. Sure, I totally agree with that. But consider for a minute why paganism lasted so long and why paganism is coming back in the United States. There are more and more people that worship the old Greek pagan gods. St. Basil somehow thought you could send a student to Plato's Academy, which was thoroughly pagan, that he himself attended, and that that interaction was good, that it could be good for the soul of a Christian, in that case, young man. And so we'll do that with you. We'll help you have that experience, but in a context where if you also get to the end of class and say, okay, Dr. Reynolds, I'm confused. I'm not sure why I should be a Christian. Well, I'll sit and talk to you about why I am a Christian and why the faith of your fathers and mothers is a good faith to hold. So we're not propaganda, we're college, but we're also not. Sometimes when people talk the way I am, they really secretly don't believe anything and they're working out their own angst on kids. And that's terrible. You shouldn't go to that kind of college. So, one thing we could talk about is, first of all, if you're going to a smaller college, how do you know you're not going to a glorified diploma mill? You know, it's really good and not bad. The second question to ask if you're going to a Christian college is, how do you know that you're going to a college that is actually Christian as opposed to Christian in name only? And the third thing we could talk about is, how can you afford to pay for college, or how could you get a good education in a state university if that becomes an option that you need? And I'm happy to talk about any of those things. Why would I go to St. Constantine if I were looking at school right now? First of all, I believe that education begins in the fear of the Lord, and that the fear of the Lord makes me wonder about the world. That's how we got science. That's how we got everything that's a product of the Christian faith. And so I want an education that centers in that, and we can provide it. But plenty of places can. I pointed to two of them. Second, I want the kind of education where I really have a mentor who will talk to me one on one consistently for 4 years, as often as I want to talk to them, where the budget hasn't determined how often I can talk to a professor, or I have to wait to grad school to get that kind of education. I'm not saying no one else does that. I'm saying I know we do it, and that if nobody else does do it, you should at least think about getting that kind of undergraduate education. And then the third thing is, a great thing about our being Orthodox, in particular, if you're Orthodox, hey, look, we're the college for you, and one of only two in the United States. Uh, but the great thing about being Orthodox for everyone who's not Orthodox is you don't have to worry that we're going to change our minds about the physical resurrection of Jesus. You don't have to worry that we're suddenly going to decide that biblical morality is false. We're not suddenly going to hire a professor who secretly thinks you can't know the truth, that it's somehow unknowable or mysterious, or that the creed is false. The same body that went into the tomb came out of the tomb, transformed and glorified. Easter is real, Pascha is real, and we'll affirm that with your student. But we won't do it in a way that statistics show drives people away from the faith, that is just beating them on the head with a hammer will help people to learn to think well. Don't go to a place that merely says think for yourself, because everybody can think for themselves unless they're dead. And then they have a different status, God knows, depending on where they end up. Uh, but you want to learn to think well at college, but you want to learn to think well for yourself. In fact, if you don't think well, you should not think for yourself. You should go down to your pastor and say, hey, pastor, you're an educated person. How should I then live, and do that? And about 90% of Americans would be better off if they did that. But notice we can't have everyone do that. We need leaders. We need people who can produce the next generation of pastors, filmmakers, thought leaders, novelists. And here's what we know: there is a way of educating leaders that has worked for 600 years in the English speaking world. And if your college doesn't do it, maybe they found a new way to do it. But I didn't invent the tutorial. I didn't invent reading books in intense discussion. And so that combination, combined with the unified vision of the Christian faith, is, I think, unique to St. Constantine. But now, if you have questions, Matthew, if you have questions, this has provoked great thought inside of you. The good news about St. Constantine is we never want to be big. We always want to be a small Oxford style college, not the university, which is made up of many colleges, that's intensely focused on one thing. But as you just heard, our students go off to law school, they go off to international relations. I think we're a good pre-med program for people who want to be serious doctors. Because if you think about it, the classics degree at Oxbridge, Oxford and Cambridge, led to all of those careers historically. Now, again, we're not Latin only, Greek only, classical in that sense, the old 19th century sense, early 20th century sense, but in this new American style model. Looks like we have a question down there. I wish I were clever enough to be able to read the chat while talking, but I am now going to overtly not read the chat. Yeah, that's a good question. How do we compare to St. John's? It will not shock you as kind of one of the premier early great text schools that insofar as we're great texts, we're like St. John's. Insofar as we do a more tutorial, by tutorial, I don't mean like tutors like at St. John's, though we use that title too as discussion leaders. This kind of intense one-on-one mentoring is very unique to us in the English speaking world in North America. That would be a way that we were different because it's required of everyone. The other thing that's true is we are really looking for a depth of character formation that is infinitely more important than our particular canon or reading list. You should always beware of a great books college that spends way more time thinking about the canon and what they should read, and not what effect will this have on the human soul. I The formation of a leader is the point, a whole soul fit for paradise. If you're a Christian college, it isn't having fluidity in Plato, because I'll meet former students, who are now sending their kids to St. Constantine as college students. I did that just this fall. That occurred. Person came up to me and said, "You did the introduction to my undergraduate education. Now you're introducing my student." All that means is I'm old, is what it comes down to. But really, what you don't want to do is become a glib. C.S. Lewis talks about this in That Hideous Strength, uh, a glib passer of general examinations who has a decent answer, who's good at cocktail parties, who's read all the right books. And my fear of some great text programs that are secular is, even if one came to reject Christianity, we have a unified vision of why all these particular books cohere together. We hope you accept our unified vision of Orthodox, small o even, Christianity. But at least if you reject it, you're rejecting something. And I think great text programs in sort of general, particularly secular ones, much as I love St. John's and have learned from faculty there, including my own mentor, Al Geyer, who did some of the program as a young man before the Korean War, is I don't want students to have lots of trivial knowledge. I don't even want students to have, like, oh, look, I see the scope and sequence of ideas. I want them to have a unified worldview that they can use to formulate all the things they run into later in life. So when I meet a student 30 years later, this is how I began to answer your question. Probably they haven't been reading Plato for fun or reading Plato at all. And they're often embarrassed. They'll say, man, I haven't thought about Homer in a long time and really enjoyed class with you. But they often can't even remember anything we specifically talked about. But what they'll remember is the formation of their soul. And I'll ask them, are you reading? And the answer is almost always yes. Are you thinking? And the answer is almost always yes. Are you in a community of thoughtful people, church people? Are you a Christian? And the answer is more often yes than not. And so, and given the demographic of gifted and talented students I've taught my whole career, that's amazing. And so in dealing with people, college is just the beginning of your education. It isn't the end. And too often, great books programs treat the canon as some kind of magic, that if we just read the Republic together, you will somehow magically become good or smart. Uh, of course not, especially if it doesn't come with a unified vision of what that means. You're likely to become Mark Studdock in That Hideous Strength, I fear. That is a person who can say lots of clever sounding things about lots of things, but ends up working for the NICE. So I hope that's not too obscure of a space trilogy reference for this group. We want to produce members of the Logos, people that are deeply committed to Christendom, Christ and his kingdom, and living that out in the real world, not people who can pass trivial pursuit questions about great books, or even say, I read Aristotle back in the day. The Nick Ethics. Just saying the Nick Ethics at a cocktail party can earn you smart points, as opposed to Nicomachean. And that's pretentious nonsense. To go more deeply, for 400 years, Reynolds has lived in North America. We came to Jamestown, and we were never provided beyond an eighth grade education. And yet many Reynoldses went on to become very excellent in the kingdom of God, including my grandparents, most of whom didn't go past the sixth grade. They became wise and smart and good, and I aspire to be like them. Education is necessary for people like we are, particularly in the time like we are, but it shouldn't make you the kind of pompous ass who actually thinks they're better than my grandparents, or somehow have a kind of insight that they had and now we lack, because we've educated ourselves out of the ability to perceive the revelation of God in nature, perceive the revelation of God in Scripture, to perceive God in the liturgy. As an Orthodox person, we sing every week, "We have seen the true light." And if we're not careful, education can make us useless at seeing the true light. We want that to become more intense for the kind of student that should ask questions. So I see it's okay to mention the space trilogy. I'm thankful for that. One way of thinking about everything I do and say is that when Hope and I, Hope's my wife, she's also got the virtue of hope, decided to get married, and I pitched her on the idea of marrying a philosopher. And philosophers are bad to marry because, unlike pizzas, we can't feed a family of four. And so I'm pitching her on this notion of marrying me and having kids and living. And I pitched her on the notion that we should form a small community like St. Anne's in that hideous strength, and that we would learn and grow together dialectically in that small community. And St. Constantine is, in that sense, the ultimate fulfillment of a vow I made to Hope. So if you want to work a puzzle with Hope and have tea, you could do that today at St. Constantine. I bet Mary Judah, who somewhere was on this call, has done that with Hope. And we'll tell you all about the wonderful things about our first grandchild, who is 2, and therefore is all we ever talk about if you're not careful. So that's an answer, I hope, to your question. Why would I not go to St. John's? I really might go to St. John's if I were one of you out there. I wouldn't go because I think there's a real danger that a Johnny becomes this kind of glib examinee. And I am the kind of person that would have been in danger of doing that. I'm a depressive. I have a struggle with not feeling, like I stink at things. And so I'm have to be very careful not to seek the kind of external validation that sounding smart gives you. Going to the right college, going to the right grad school. Yet simultaneously, I love to read, I love to think. I'm the kind of person that has real questions about the world. And notice, if you're the kind of person that has intellectual questions about the world and the faith, you can't feel your way out of those. And God is very happy with you to ask those kinds of questions and find the answers together. That's how science was born in the Christian West in particular. So I think we can help you with those things. But not everyone is like that, right? I had one grandparent that I think never thought about her faith at all while having a deep, meaningful personal experience with Jesus because she didn't have those questions. And she was a high IQ person. This wasn't, but going to a college like ours, that wouldn't have been a great thing for her to do. There would have been no reason for her to do it in particular. The person that really should go to college, a true liberal arts college, is the kind of person that just naturally has questions, wonders about the world. And wonder is different than doubt, right? Wonder is wonderful, where they say, I believe in God the Father Almighty, and you say, I wonder what that means. That's different than saying, prove it to me. Our classes would tend to say, yeah, I wonder what that means, and we'll think about it. Um, I have really smart relatives that never have those thoughts. And that's the kind of person that ought to think maybe college in general is not for me. I should go learn a trade. I should get a craft because super brilliant people for 400 years didn't go to college, were named Reynolds, and that was great. They did well. But notice there were also people in my family that wondered about the world and they never gave us access to even high school, let alone college. And then when they finally, after World War II, decided to give us access to high school and college, they didn't give us rich people college or high school. They gave us like generic uh, McCollege, with giant things. And my grandparents, when they sent my dad off to Marshall University, how did they know that that wasn't the kind of program that rich people sent their kids to? All they knew about college was watching movies about college that Hollywood pumped out. And if you look at movies from that period, nobody ever went to class, right? Class was always ending, and you were off to a football field or you were off to get a date because it was a romance. There was nothing about the education of college. So when my grandparents sacrificed to send my dad to college, they didn't realize that they were sending him to a college that would be class based and actually hold him back the rest of his life because it wasn't they didn't know what to look for. Now, notice that doesn't mean he should have been sent to a brand name college, because he would probably have gotten ripped off that way too. Those colleges have evolved. They don't care about undergraduates. The focus is on the grad students. And so, but my grandparents didn't know what to look for. Now, fortunately for my dad, he's so brilliant, much better student than I ever was, that he found his way. And that's, if you go to a giant state school and they're going to put you in giant classes and they're not going to give you access to mentoring, this is key. Find the good professors and hang out with them all the time. I can tell a college student, I suppose you could do this at St. Constantine, who's wasted their life, when I say, who's the professor who knows you well enough that they'd send you $50 if you were in trouble? Like if you were really just in trouble, they'd give you $50 or they'd feed you dinner. And if the answer is you spent 4 years not learning the grown-ups that are actually the people you're paying to be with and to hang with as an adult, you've wasted 4 years of school. Now, if you go to a place where you can't do that, you also have, you're getting a credential, but you're not getting an education. So I believe that strongly. You're paying for the professors. Can you see them? And by the way, the professors, um, most places, 2/3 of the revenue that you're paying do not go to anything that you think of as college, not the sports programs, not anything related to college. It's going into the giant pit of administration and upkeep and things like that. Professors are not getting rich on your tuition dollars, for sure. So cut them some slack. The other question I would always ask people, if you're looking to find out whether you're getting a good deal at that college, is to ask the college what the discount rate for the college is. So when I sit down and make a budget, obviously I'm charging $12,000 to come to the college, but some priests are coming here, their kids are coming here. Orthodox priests make like zero, many of them, and they're getting a big discount. So I'm not getting $12,000 from every student. The discount rate is what I get overall from the average student. And find out what that is, and then find out what your scholarship offer is. And a lot of parents discover that the school is allegedly giving them a scholarship, which they've really invented for you in a back room. It's like fake. It doesn't, you don't even have to apply for it. And you're paying more than the discount rate. Don't go to a school that doesn't want you enough to charge you the disco rate. Now, we don't scholarship, so that's we're indifferent to that, because I don't like getting into that game of buying students. It's really terrible. My own daughter applied to a film school. She didn't want to go to the film program I started right away. So she applied to a different one, and it looked like she could go. They sent her an aid package. Even I looked at and thought, okay, we can squeeze that out. But I read the fine print and I discovered that they wanted her to borrow $100,000 by the time she graduated. That a lot of the so-called financial aid, and this was really buried in the letter, was access to loans. And then on top of it, they were giving her less money than what I discovered the discount rate. The nice thing about having the jobs I have, I can discover these things myself, that they gave everyone else. So really, she was subsidizing other students. They didn't want her at all, really, in an aggressive way. They just flattered her with a letter that appeared to be giving her things they weren't giving her. And if you get into a college that starts doing things like that to you, like sending you giant certificates and pretending that you are so super awesome that you won the leadership award, ask them, what were the criteria for the leadership award? And the other kind of dirty little secret, and we don't make our parents fill out a FAFSA for this reason. FAFSA is the federal financial aid form, is less about you and it's more about what the college can charge you. So if you fill out a FAFSA, they know what you can pay, and that's what they're going to charge you often. And that's sad. That whole industry is corrupt in that way, in my opinion, which is why, by the way, I'm sometimes unpopular inside the industry for this kind of thing. But ask, don't overpay. I would never borrow money to go to college, personally, nowadays. I mean, if you get into Harvard, they're not going to make you pay anyway, because but you're also not going to get a very good, in my opinion, undergraduate education, because that's not mainly what their professors are about. They're mainly about grad students.
Did you see the question about film at St. Constantine?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Would I come here if I wanted to study film? Um, Having started a really good film major at HCU down the street, run by one of my former students, if you went to study film as a discipline, like my daughter did at HCU, Houston Christian University was Houston Baptist University. They changed their name over the last couple of years to show what they really were like all along. Um, you shouldn't come here. Like you want to learn how to run a camera. But my own belief is, even having done a film program that you should consider going to, is if you want to work in the industry, that is, make movies, make things, filmmaking has become so decentralized and exists all over the country in so many important ways that I think getting a good liberal arts education is just as good as getting a film major, particularly in a program like ours that is very film savvy. So I have a lot of professors, one down the hall, I'm looking at him, David, who spend a lot of time thinking about film and using film as a text in class and discussing it, thinking about how to make films. Are you going to learn how to make a movie here? No. If you want to do that, go down, down the five, and I'm sorry, the 59. I'm back in LA in my head, and go there, or go to Biola. Biola has a great film school that Josh came out of, that is at HCU, and there you'll learn how to make a movie. But my own advice is get a really good BA, and then go be apprenticed to filmmakers. I think long term, that's probably more efficient. And that's not putting down what Josh and everybody does. I just think for most people, it's more likely to lead to success in the industry. Uh, what did Steven Spielberg do to become a great director? That's a good question. No one knows, because this is a kind of art or craft. So if you want the technical end of it, definitely go to a film school. Houston Baptist, Biola, they have them. If you want a really sound education that's film friendly with people who have contacts in the film industry, we're a really good choice. So I didn't spend, 20 years in LA without being able to do that.
You'll be a better storyteller from
I
the
think
grad school
so.
program.
I think so. But we're also like film friendly in the sense that we know people in the industry. I have former students that work for major studios, and I don't want to name drop. So, that's neither here nor there. But my professors do too, because of Great Books programs, we're probably one of the most film friendly, given my background and given Biola and given Houston Christian. We're one of the most friendly, film friendly places. You're likely to be able to take a class just on film, for example, or for your senior thesis, we would gladly let somebody do like all of Tarkovsky, the filmmaker. And I have Tarkovsky's book sitting on the desk right behind me. So finding a place that's film friendly is important. You should do that. And most great books schools are not, in fact, film friendly. They might even be proud of the fact that they would not discuss film. This would not be core to the curriculum, but I once taught a class just on vampire literature, which is a uniquely Christian invention. And that included looking at film, looking at vampire literature and film. This was the apex of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and thinking about Joss Whedon as a director. Joss Whedon is interesting in that he hates Christianity, but he's tormented by its truth. And anytime you deal with vampire literature, you can hate Christianity, but you're kind of sucked into a kind of Christian worldview in a funny sort of way. So I'm not advocating people go watch that. I'm saying that wrestling with that was really good. So I think we're a film friendly place. That would be the best way to describe it. Yeah, so the one thing I would say, I'm kind of looking down through the comments, is another thing we're really good for is come and do 2 years with us and then transfer someplace and pick up a major. if I wanted to become a nurse, for example, and I have many, many former students who are RNs, getting something like a general education in this kind of program will make you in charge of your floor. You're the kind of person that can discuss things without losing your mind. You're the kind of person that knows how to deal with contentious issues without being crazy. And you've got a deep plunge in ethics. So usually students that think they're going to do that end up staying in the programs I've been involved in and not transferring out and then going back and picking up the major. A big thing to point out is most people in difficult majors are not going to be in school for 4 years. You're going to be in school for 5 years. And so if you're looking at a difficult career major, ask how long it takes the average student to graduate, because they'll present you a program that looks like 4 years, but you'd have to be like not work, kind of wealthy. And if you're a nurse, you're going to be in school for 5 years. You just are at most places. And so you need to think that way. Like pre-med students, engineering students, many, many former students who become engineers. And what they would often do is like 3 years of a school like St. Constantine, Biola in this case, and then go to USC and do the engineering program. You know, use a college job prep. So in the film question, uh, either go get a school that will teach you how to run a camera or video production. After all, most people who work in video do not work in the film industry. They work for hospitals. There's one, Houston is a big center for hospitals. And there is one hospital who pointed out to me that they had more people in video related areas than doctors because so much of what they did was video centered. So we're good preparation for that. We know how that goes, and we know people in that part of the industry. My daughter, who wants to be a filmmaker and works with making films, uh, doesn't do that to make money. She reviews films for court. Her money-making job is a videographer for court cases, and watching those and using the skills that she picked up in her major that way. Yeah, great books and a psychology degree and then becoming a filmmaker actually would be pretty common in my experience because I'm not sure that for people I know who make movies, and I have students, former students with IMDb pages, both as performers and kind of low-level filmmakers or people who work on high-level films. I really can't tell you one thing they all did. But one thing they all did, if they were educated with me, and with the faculty that I've worked with, is they really learned to read well, write well, and think well. So I sent one student, former student, to the Royal Opera, to on a full ride, one of the few American students ever earned. And she was really privileged to do that because she could actually talk to the directors and the writers because she, given her background in great text, could understand. I'm going to get this wrong. In musical theater, we'd call it the book, and I know it has a different term in opera, but whatever the score, she could talk about it intelligently. The plot, she could. She wasn't just a beautiful woman with a beautiful voice. Obviously, she was that because that's really thin air. And it's really fun to go see a former student sing at the Houston Grand, most recently as Mother Superior in the production of Sound of Music here. What enabled her to do that? Well, she obviously had one of the best voices of anyone I ever taught. But I don't know. The answer is God wanted her to, because when you start to look at careers like this, uh, I'm going to write the great American novel. Um, yeah, good luck. Take a look at people who did write great American novels and try to find what they all had in common. And I can't tell you what that is, which means college should be as broad as possible on this front. If you're a parent listening to this, I want you to think back. So I'm old, so I graduated from college in 1986, and go look up what they thought the jobs of the future would look like over the course of my career in 1986, and you will discover that they are uniformly wrong. I, if you went to the University of Rochester, Kodak, Bosch and Lomb, and Xerox were aspirational management jobs, none of which would be aspirational management jobs for anyone, and they hardly exist. To the extent that Eastman Kodak exists, it's mining old patents. They went from tens of thousands of employees in Rochester to none. Universities and colleges are very bad at predicting the future, the job of the future. So when my current students are my age and I'm long dead, I should not be trying to predict what work will look like. I will now make a remarkably undercutting prediction. Are you ready, Matthew? I'm going to say a thing that no one has said on this, I'm guessing, ever. And the thing I'm going to say is this. I believe that by the time the people listening to this are my age, notice I'll be dead, so they can't hold it against me. Most people will not work for money, because white collar jobs, as we know them, are going to go the way of muscle power jobs after the Industrial Revolution. And think of it this way. You should get an education that you would get if you were going to be a centimillionaire. If you were going to inherit from your parents $100 million in a trust that you couldn't give away, just every year you're going to get enough money to live any way you want, would you go to college? And would you get the education the college is offering you? And if the answer is no, I wouldn't do that, you probably shouldn't do what you're doing. Because given robotics and artificial intelligence, more and more white collar jobs are going to be redundant. It's probably already the case that lots of places have people that basically they could get rid of and not suffer any loss of skill or talent. More and more white collar jobs are going to be found as redundant. Do you know what is not going to be redundant, Matthew? Two things. The George Jetson job of being the guy who pushes the button to say yes. Go watch Star Trek, the original series, at the captain's chair. And it's more realistic than later Star Treks that have jillions of buttons and other things. Captain Kirk, is faced with a yes, no button and a rheostat to go more or less, because the ship's going to be controlled by AI. You're firing the photon torpedoes. You, the human, are deciding to fire them, but you wouldn't actually need a giant crew to go load them and do other things in anything like 24th century or 25th century technology. And we're already rapidly getting there. So here's a happy view of the future. Working for money may become more about getting paid for humans to talk to humans. So, for example, muscle power is no longer the way we power most things. So it was devalued, but athletes now make fabulous amount of money to entertain us with muscle power. There are some jobs, but there are not lots of them. That's why you shouldn't, oh, I'm going to play football and that's going to be my job, for almost no one. On the other hand, coaches and people who help us learn to play games and flourish as humans, workout coaches, we're always going to need those, not because robots couldn't do them ultimately, but because people like people. So you can think of yourself as, what if we technologically inherit $100 million equivalent? Like, we no longer have to work for a living to avoid starving or to avoid, how can we give our lives meaning? How can we live meaningful lives? Can rich people live meaningful lives when they don't have to work for money? The answer is yes. And they always educated their kids, like I'm advocating you educate your kids or yourself, because what I'm talking about will never get out of date. Because if we change ourselves, if we become flourishing human beings, then it doesn't matter what we do for a living. So assume that I'm totally wrong and that AI is a big bust and it's all a fraud, like people pretended the internet would be back in that era. I will still have taught you the classical way to become a flourishing human being that rich people gave their kids for hundreds of years when they didn't have to work. And then they went out and created jobs and created civilizations out of it. So it's a good bet. If I'm right, you're future proofing your kids against a future where it'll be like even a privilege to be able to get paid for work. Like, that's going to be really rare. On the other hand, if that's true, and there's a lot of good to it, Are we all going to sit like Wall-E people in giant chairs and scroll endlessly and try to amuse ourselves to death? No, I hope my wife teaches trumpet and is a classically trained trumpet player. And I hope that we'd all learn to play the trumpet, not because robots or sounds couldn't play the trumpet better than we are, but I'm a very bad instrumentalist, and my wife is very good. But I did learn to play the recorder. I know that sounds funny, fairly competently in elementary school and kept playing it all along. So at Christmas, my wife and I will sit down, she'll take out her flute, which is not her primary instrument, and we'll play hymns together. And that's enjoyable and it's human. I can guarantee you I'm the worst person she ever plays with in terms of musically. But we love each other and so we like it. It's like I don't take Wim Wam's art where she draws, she's learning to draw with crayons and say, gosh, this isn't Michelangelo, or the AI on my computer right now can produce better art than this. I hang her art on the refrigerator, not an AI version of her art. So if you look to future proof your kids' education, I don't think they're going to be videographers. It's the bad news. I don't think they're going to be animators, except at the very end of it, because I can already, with free tools, begin to replace so many jobs that are in the crawl of a movie. And this is where we're headed. So creativity, that's always going to be in demand. Reading well, writing well, thinking well, and being human with humans, that's always going to be in demand. But all the jobs my grandparents and ancestors did for 400 years, from Jamestown, Yorktown, where we were, the Civil War, where we fought on the Union side, when Virginia seceded from the Union, West Virginia and the Reynolds family seceded from Virginia, all the way through World War II and all of that, none of those jobs essentially exist. I think as of 1900, Matthew, 50% of Americans farmed and had to. I I think it's 1 or 2% now that farm. Imagine though the difference between people in a culture like I'm describing who began to farm not for fun, but for the good of their souls, making their own food, being in touch with the animals they deal with. It's one reason the college has sheep, even though we're in an urban environment. And we do that not because like somehow our chickens can make, though right now they make cost efficient eggs. They're not really cost efficient, right? It's because we're humans and we like hanging out with animals. And so we do. So there's the weirdest thing you're ever going to hear, I think, on this. If I had to make a prediction, and I already told you academics are bad at this, I would predict that jobs will become George Jetson button pushing jobs that are at the end of a long AI process, or they're going to be very much cruise director on ships type jobs, like how to help humans flourish as humans, not the kind of jobs that we've all done as, I don't know, midwits with college degrees in the middle class and upper middle class of the US. I think those jobs are going to die. Um, I will say this, you can find me on film saying in 2012 that the culture of celebrity that was widely replacing the culture of accomplishment in the United States would make Donald Trump a formidable presidential candidate. Not because I'm a prophet or a son of a prophet, but cultural trends are better to bet on than economic trends. And I can only tell you in 2012, everyone laughed and said, well, that's the most ludicrous thing we ever heard. But the reason I said it had nothing to do with politics. It is he was a man like Oprah would have been the other really good candidate who basically had perfect penetration. Everybody knew who he was. And we like celebrities. Like being famous is by itself a huge asset. Look at clicks, right? Why am I clicking on this place? I don't even like the person, but being famous in and of itself is an accomplishment. Now, if you could predict that in 2012, and you could, not because I'm even clever, and that was just a lucky particular guess, um, why does anyone think that mid-wit jobs, like middle of the road jobs that are brain power jobs, won't be replaced? In West Virginia, when I was a little boy, there was a guy known as the calculator, and he could add up columns of numbers like instantaneously. And he had lived just too long. Banks had totally replaced him. He went from being indispensable and highly paid to being able to do a party trick. And what I'm telling you is that's coming for, if you work with your mind, most of us can be gotten rid of. AI will soon be able to teach me Greek better than Al Geyer. So then the question is, why did I want to learn Greek from Al Geyer? Because he changed my life and helped save my soul. That's my pitch for St. Constantine College. We are future proof. And we're also, you're inheriting $100 million proof too. And if you are that person, you should come and we'll take some of it. If you would like to give it to us. I'm sorry, I'm kidding, of course. Sort of. Yeah, so is debt necessary? So at $12,000 a year, I think you could work it out so it wasn't necessary, or the amount of debt that you would get into is limited. But suppose I wanted, so forget about our college and forget about colleges where you're not going to have debt. So let's assume you're going to take on debt. And of course, I worked at places where it was necessary. Most people did borrow money. And my general rule of thumb was this: borrow enough money that it would be about buying a new car, and then don't buy a new car until you pay it off. So let's say the car that you would tend to use at your family status new would be about 40K. Don't borrow much more than 40K. And then the student themselves and the family, for the student, discipline yourself so that you don't move your student loan over to the 30-year plan that lowers the payments and never reduces the principal. But don't buy a new car until you've paid off that loan. And that's worked for my students. But I had many, many students at places I worked through nobody's fault. There's not an evil conspiracy. And like I said, the college wasn't sitting on piles of cash, who would owe like $100,000. And that's what would have happened to my daughter if I hadn't known the system. And you shouldn't, $100,000, that's a lot of money for what you're likely to make in your first job out of school. So you become tempted to refinance it. And even bankruptcy doesn't discharge a student loan. So the military is really good still as a way to pay for college without taking on debt. Teaching in a public school or in an area like I work in, one good thing about the K through 12 at St. Constantine is we intentionally placed it in a neighborhood that qualifies, and our student body qualifies for student loan relief. And so teaching with Teach for America or someplace like that for a few years can help discharge some of that student debt too. So if you're a person, yeah, I'm just going to have to borrow money to go to school, maybe even for St. Constantine, like try to keep it within, my guess is right now 40K. I mean, the whole St. Constantine education is 48,000. So if you borrowed almost all of it and didn't have your kid work, that would do it. But of course, you have to eat too. You have to live. So I get that. I get that parents may have to borrow money. We have a question here. How did we choose Houston as a location? I will tell you the earnest truth. I could have gone anywhere to do this project, and we really did pick Houston. So Houston is an intentional location. And I'll give you a first reason. I think that most centuries have a quintessential American city. Leaving aside New York City, which is always kind of like the paradigm American city, uh, the 18th century Philadelphia was very much, the seat of the revolution, the thing. In the 19th century, I would argue Chicago was a really great way to get to know the 19th century. See the University of Chicago that John D. Rockefeller built inside the city. And I would argue, see the Reagan Revolution, that Los Angeles and the West Coast was kind of the paradigm for the 20th century. I would argue as one of the energy capitals of the world, on one of the most active ports in the world. People forget Houston is a port city off the Panama Canal. Uh, and as a giant medical center in the world with several other assets. We're in Texas, which is a kind of business friendly state, traditional values friendly state. And we're also right in the center of the US. So if I need to speak in Los Angeles or do business in LA, I can fly to LA. And if I push it, have a business meeting and sleep in my own bed in Houston. Chicago would be the other city that's like that. But Chicago is in Illinois, which I think is a state in decline, as opposed to Texas, which I think is a state going ahead. So we're a growing city. The other good thing about Houston is we are, in the good sense of diverse, the most diverse city in the United States, arguably. There's no majority in Houston. I just, if I throw a rock off my building, I would hit Little India inside. That's what they call it. Sorry, inside of Houston. There are streets just to my left that most of the street names are in Chinese. So Houston is a place that is also open for business. So Houstonians don't care who your parents are. They care, they're gung ho. In fact, almost to a fault, will tear down buildings and just do business. So we're also a really good place to build a thriving career in lots of different areas. We're a major city. We're probably the third largest metro area in the US, having surpassed Chicago. But the count isn't for sure. But we pick up city-sized population every 5 years in a place like Houston. So I think it's a good place to be. I can be in New York City, Chicago, Phoenix, Denver. I can be there in really short order because we have two international airports. Uh, the other thing is we're a global city because of energy and other things. Uh, Almost everybody that I talk to that comes to the US will eventually pass through Houston. And I think if you're on either coast in one way, it's kind of limiting. Um, I'm about an hour off the East Coast and about 2 hours off LA, and that's quite livable. I don't jet lag in either direction. Yeah, I love Texas, and I didn't live here. I'm a West Virginian. I do remind my Texas friends that the last time Texas got uppity, West Virginia came and defeated them in an entire war. So they should be careful about getting too uppity, or we'll have to do it again. Uh, so, that's the way it goes. I gave a talk recently in Richmond. And I was able to say, Virginia, that the last John Reynolds in my family to be in Richmond was a prisoner of war. And everyone stared at me for about 10 seconds until, oh, yes, I get it. Uh, because I had literally never been to Richmond somehow. And the last John Reynolds to be in Richmond had literally been in Libby prison inside the city of Richmond. So our family's not very good at anything. We're always getting captured and becoming philosophers and stuff like that. So what can I tell you? But I love Houston, and I think you should love it too. The weather is, um, hmm, we live in a swamp. Now, what that means is for 6 months of the year, like right now, this is actually a great place to be. Like cold here, I'm under a cold warning because it's going to be 40. If it snows occasionally here and everything closes down. So most of the year, think of it as reverse northeast. Our summer, you just are inside. And Houston is built for you to be inside, like you're inside at the University of Rochester in January. February is tedious if you're in upstate New York. It's snowy, but not Christmas. It's cold, but often not snowy and not cold enough for ice. So it's mushy and gray and kind of yucky. Houston for 6 months of the year is kind of an awesome place to live. But don't come here in August, man, and think you're going to vacation outside. I got used to it. There's Shakespeare in the Park here at the Miller Outdoor Theater. And once the sun sets, I'll go sit outside, and watch Shakespeare at the Miller. But, the weather, there are places with better weather. LA is one of them. But good luck running a robustly Orthodox Christian college in Los Angeles. It can be done. God bless Biola for doing it. But I don't want that kind of pressure or heat. I much prefer to send my students out into a job market where their values are likely not to impede their getting hired. Yeah, what's better about Houston than Dallas, by the way, and I thought about Dallas as a location. Um, Yeah, we have lots of connections with lots of monasteries and with all the seminaries. I actually teach apologetics at St. Vlad's and we'll be there this summer. We have good relationship with St. Tikhon's and probably will help them with some projects. If you're interested in our relationship with Orthodox community, go to the college's Orthodox Studies Institute online, where we do research on Orthodox numbers, what's going on in the Orthodox world. We're the group of academics that actually think our bishops are right about things and aren't always complaining and trying to live out orthodoxy in the real world. So we love our monasteries. We send students there on field trips. We have a nun, an Orthodox nun that works in our K through 8 that students have availability to. And if I had my way before I died, we'll have a monastic community that springs up near the school. So that kind of thing, yeah, we do that. And if you go to the Orthodox Studies Institute, you can see sort of the Orthodox side of our thinking. If you're not Orthodox, should you come here? Sure. Uh, the way you might consider going to a secular school like St. John's, or a Catholic school like University of Dallas, another school I can really recommend to you as a good choice if that's your cup of tea. We have really good relationships with all those places. But we're really Orthodox and you should consider that. But most of our students are, in fact, Orthodoxy is small in the US. So in the K through 12, for example, we're about 20% of the population of the K through 12 as Orthodox because I maybe a couple thousand, 3,000, 4,000 of the faithful in this part of Houston total. And that's a rounding error at most Catholic parishes in a city like Houston. You know, there were many parishes that have many more communicants. So we live to serve those folks while holding firm to what we believe. About half our faculty are Orthodox. All of our faculty have to go through a really yearly rigorous screening process. If you decide, for example, that traditional Christian morality is wrong, you will not stay here. Like we don't have tenure. So, you know, we ask you yearly, hey, you still with us? And like I said, the Orthodox Church isn't even capable of changing some of these ideas. I don't even know who would do it. It would cause schism if they tried. That's both a strength and a weakness in one way, but should comfort parents. We don't proselytize, is the other thing that's true. It's actually very bad if you're an Orthodox person. My priest would get mad at me if we proselytized other Christians. We think we're right or we change our minds, as my granddaddy used to say. But you know, we don't get up in the morning when 40% of our population are nuns. That is, they have no religious affiliation. Just talking to the nuns is enough work for us to do. Than to worry about other Nicene Christians. Again, that I'm not putting down the fact that we think we're right. We do think we're right. And I've written a whole paper on how right we think we are. But we're also a college, not a church. Uh, yeah.
I'll
So
make this one the last question, John Mark, if we can.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'll talk your head off. I had a great aunt. Her name was Kumi, and she actually was raised on the Civil War pension of my great grandfather because he remarried, as Civil War veterans were wont to do. Um, And she once asked me if I'd ever heard of anyone talking themselves to death, because if it were possible, I'm the person that could do it. So I apologize for this, but I come by it naturally, as they say. Yeah, what kind of topics are chosen by seniors? That's a really good question. And the answer is if it's academically viable, almost anything. So I am currently with a historian, so not me, because I'm a philosopher, not a historian, working with a student on doing first rank research on, this sounds very specialized, but Orthodoxy is divided by ethnic groups in the United States. What is the effect of that on evangelism? There is like the default position, we shouldn't be that way to start with. Everyone agrees kind of on that. But and there's a belief it might affect evangelism, but no one's ever actually researched this. And so the student is researching that topic. On the other hand, I had a son here, and then he met a college student here, and then they got married. So one of our college graduates is a daughter-in-law now. I did say to Ian the college had served its function and we should close it, but that was just a joke. And she wrote on Dorothy Sayers and the impact of Dorothy Sayers, both her serious academic work and the Peter Wimsey novels. Like, how do you see Dorothy Sayers' serious work in the Peter Wimsey novels? One real problem in classical Christian education, by the way, is we took a one-off piece that Dorothy Sayers wrote, and I hope I'm not transgressing things, and we took it way more seriously than Dorothy Sayers would be horrified at how seriously we took the lost tools of learning. And if we're not careful, we can really blow it. Like we can accidentally make some really bad decisions. But simultaneously, as a big Sayers fan, my future daughter-in-law really reflected on that. Like, how did this really excellent essay, The Lost Tools of Learning, how do you see it worked out in the Peter Wimsey novels and the Lord Peter Wimsey novels? And I think she did that, and it was good. We have another student working on film and thinking about film inside of particular filmmakers. And then we have much more traditional kind of senior theses. I just went to a defense of Dante and a particular view and interpretation of Dante. It depends on what you think you're doing afterwards. So one of our recent graduates is on, God bless them, I have 3 or 4 former students who are professors at Baylor. And so we tend to send a lot of graduates to Baylor. It's a Christian-friendly school. Uh, they still mean to be Christian and they're Christian friendly, and there are pockets of really intense Christian faith, particularly in the grad programs. And so we sent one of our graduates to do an MA in English because they actually want to teach in classical Christian schools and thought an MA in English would be useful. And so his thesis was on T.S. Eliot and really helped prepare him to put together a good master's degree proposal for Baylor. And he's there on a full ride. He's not borrowing any money for grad school. Unless you're getting a degree that's going to pay you a lot of money, think law, and law doesn't always. We have a glut of lawyers in some ways. You should go to a grad program that's free or very close to free if you can. There are exceptions. I've had students borrow money to get PhDs at Oxford, and that has worked out well for them. So there are exceptions to every general rule. But grad school is often free unless it's a professional degree, like an MBA. You're going to pay for that. And then you need to ask, do your graduates get a good ROI, return on investment out of the MBA? Some programs, yes, like getting the MBA makes you more money than you spent. And so they won't give you any scholarshiping at all. USC is a good example of that. I had a former student who did Women in Leadership MBA, and she decided not to do it because they wouldn't scholarship her. But then they pointed out, hey, your first internship is going to be 6 figures, like your first internship. And it was a world she wasn't interested in when she talked to the professors. It didn't fit her faith view, and she didn't want to deal with it. But yeah, a grad program can be a good ROI, even if it leads to debt. Harvard Law School or Yale Law School obviously paid off for J.D. Vance. Right. But again, notice that if JD, I mean, go read Hillbilly Elegy. That was all about go to the Marines, get, Ohio State paid for, use being a veteran to get a kind of boost towards Yale. And while you're at Yale, make sure you're making the contacts that can pay for that really expensive degree that you got. Don't just sit around and, unless you're going to inherit wealth, drink yourself out of the program or, skate through the program. So these are all very obvious things, and good character would produce them. But a lot of times people don't go to colleges and make use of what the most important thing is there. That is the professors they're paying for. And in some ways, big colleges don't want you to. I was doing consulting, and we'll end here. I'm sorry, Matthew. I I was doing consulting work for one big place. It wasn't necessarily a Christian place, and it's no place I worked. No place I worked. I've had only good experiences, and I think I've recommended every school to you that I ever worked at because I had good experiences at them. I but at this place, I said, man, all your general education classes are giant. They're taught by adjuncts. How people are in the back playing games with their phones. They're not paying attention. They're going to get an A because, of course, they're going to get an A. You can't afford to fail them. Does this make you feel bad? And the person said something that I thought was very honest and very true about the problem in my field, my discipline, that is higher education. He said, see those kids in the front? They're going to go up and talk to the professor and they're going to get all the care they could possibly want. The other 190 kids, we're glad they don't want a real education. We'll give them a credential because they're paying for the 10 kids that are getting an actual education. So I'll point out that at this big school, and a really big school, it was possible to get a first-rate education. You just had to be savvy enough to know that everything there was trying to distract you from doing the expensive thing. That is, hang out with the professors and make them teach you. They were doing everything they could to edutain you because the edutain you kids were paying the same tuition, often more tuition, and they weren't being disturbed. Like, leave them alone, let them drift along in their, for every JD Vance that went to Ohio State and graduated early and killed himself to work up and out to Yale, you've got, pick on Ohio State, it's true of a lot of places, people who are just there to drift along, graduate and get a midwit college job with their good degree. It's a good degree. And that's too bad. And don't do that. Like, don't do that. And it's not even Christian advice. It's just you're getting ripped off. They know that. And my fear is that the kind of job that a kind of midwit graduate of a like white collar degree can get is disappearing. Think Elon Musk coming to your corporation and deciding who they really need. That's going to be more and more true everywhere. What did he do with Twitter, Matthew? He lay off 80% or 90% of Twitter.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, and he may have hired back some small percentage of them, but notice Twitter didn't break. And what they discovered was they had tons of people. There were meeting rooms where the dry erase markers had dried up because no one used them. More and more corporations are going to discover that people are creating work for themselves, like meetings and Substacks, but they're not working. They're not creating value. And so become the person in college that creates value in your college. Okay, sorry,
All
done.
right. Well, thank you very much, sir. That was excellent. I hope
Some of it might have been true, right? So when you speculate, some of it'll be true and some of it won't be.
I know I kind of want to see if your predictions come true. That's
Yeah, the wonderful thing about the prediction I just made is I'll be dead before I can surely be wrong. But I'll say this, if I'm right, you will see more and more white collar jobs disappearing and more jobs functionally being a keep the revolution from happening by keeping people employed to the end of their careers. And then your kids and grandkids will find it harder and harder to get meaningful work of the sort you had easily.
yeah.
If I'm right.
Yeah. Well, this was great, and I think it's very much appreciated by these young folks and their parents listening um, to get what they needed to get some information about the school there, about St. Constantine College, and why you think Houston is lovely, and but then
I'm
also
sure I
honest.
think it's lovely. I think it's going to change the world.
Okay,
Uh, uh,
fair,
Kind of
fair.
like Constantinople, we're the center of a certain kind of world, but I doubt we would ever be described as lovely.
Okay, that's good because I was wondering what kind of rose-colored glasses you might be wearing.
No, no, I live in a swamp, man, but I
Yeah,
live in a swamp that's winning.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I always enjoy it when I go there, but I don't go there in August, so
Yeah,
there's that.
don't
Yeah.
do that.
But
The
anyways,
swamp,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for passing on all your wisdom and advice there and some information about the school. I hope everybody will go to the St. Constantine College website and check it out and yeah, follow through. All right. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.